From the age of 4 to 5, I would always go to bed with a smile on my face. As my sister came into the room, she would always see me staring at the ceiling, smiling, and just get completely confused about it. A month later, there was a huge storm and it cut off our power. There was absolutely nothing going on, no electricity. And then, so when we were playing cards, the power was still off, but the TV turned back on. And it switched right to a horror movie. I think it was The Shining. That's the power was still off. We didn't have any extra generators inside the apartment that we were at. And then one more month later, my sister's phone decided to just spin in a circle at, I don't know, Mach 20 on our kitchen table and broke our glass. 2 more months later, we had suspicions that something was going on at the apartment. Our friend Katie, who was really close to us, decided to come over, and trust me, this girl, she's really shy. She can't do anything. Suddenly, she took her clothes off and started going crazy inside of that apartment. She would never have done that. The next morning, we woke up to her just screaming and then passing out. When she came back to us, she had no recollection of doing any of that. And to this day, I believe that I've been carrying around something that is possessed, because it's only been happening as soon as I've been looking at the ceiling. I don't do that anymore, but I feel like I've passed it on to somebody, and that really terrifies me.
Well, it's a story that started when my brother was still at home. We had a black wall in the attic. My brother used to sleep there. It was all fine, dandy, but 2 weeks after my brother left, on the black wall, handprints started appearing, like white handprints. At first we were like, maybe my brother left them, we didn't see them, we didn't know. But eventually, over the night, half the wall suddenly was white with hands, smudges, and we were like, well, that's weird. My mother was like, oh god, please don't tell me it's ghosts. I didn't care as much. I was like, shit like this happens, I guess. I don't know. It was pretty creepy, but I didn't mind that much. Until the next day, the rest of the wall started turning white, and a pentagram appeared, halfway on the wall. There was a pentagram in between the smudges and stuff. And at that moment I was like, yeah, might be a bit weird. My mother didn't want to paint the wall, and I was like, nah, I'm just gonna sleep there, don't worry. So now I'm sleeping there with the wall still unpainted, with the handprints on it and the pentagram. Up until this day.
Alright, so there was this doll we had. It was called the Damn It doll. So at the time I lived with my friends, and they had their mom got this gift of a doll called the Damn It doll that you would basically when you got angry, you'd slam it against the wall 3 times, you're like, damn it, damn it, damn it. And that was the whole gist of it. And we just left it in a room. It just chilled there for a while. Well, one night we randomly found it in the living room, and we're just like, oh, maybe one of the younger siblings went upstairs, grabbed it, and was playing with it. And the next night, it was it was the younger kids' room. So, we still thought, one of the kids was playing with it, whatever. But then they're there's 2 younger siblings. sharing that room. There was a brother and a sister. And the brother, he was like, oh no, like, I wasn't messing with it. I didn't even know, like, where it was in your room. And then the sister, she said that she, didn't mess with it either. So we're like, okay, one of them's obviously, like, doing it. Whatever. So we, what we did is we put it in my room. I shared a room as well with the oldest sibling. So we put it in my room and slept with it. And when we woke up, it was in the refrigerator. So at that point, we're like, what is happening? And we suspected, like, at that point, we suspected that it was the middle child. She was like a year younger than me. But the thing is, we weren't too sure about how she got it, considering that the stairs into our room were really loud. And so we were pretty sure that we would have, like, heard her come downstairs. And so in, like, a last attempt to kind of, like, make sure no one is able to get it, I hid it somewhere. I personally hid it somewhere. And I think it was in, like, a drawer somewhere underneath a bunch of crap. And when we all woke up, it was in the microwave. And then the last time we saw it, one more night, we just let it alone. No one wanted to, like, try and hide it. No one wanted anything to do with it. We left it there, and in the morning we saw it outside on the porch, hanging by a, like, piece of yarn, like a noose. And then after that, we never saw it again.
In the neighborhood where I grew up, we have woods surrounding us on three sides, and it's owned by this weird farmer guy. It's like this really, like, decrepit place where there's burnout cars throughout the woods and all this weird stuff. And when we were kids, we used to go, like, exploring it. Like, at night we'd like wrap a t-shirt on a stick and stick it in gasoline, make a torch out of it, and go walking around. And eventually, as we'd, like, go out there more and more, like, start to notice, like, when you'd, like, look behind you, you'd see, like, these flashes of white back there, like, out in the woods. And it was something you didn't really, like, think about it, whatever. You just dark out, you're going on with your thing. And eventually, it started to realize, like, it resembled a little girl in a white gown, holding a teddy bear. Like, as we saw, like, the shape out in the background, like, more and more. And it's something that, like, you would never, like, look and just see, like, a little girl standing there, but you'd see it, and then you'd look back and it's not there. So, like, I kind of always just chalked it up to one of those things where, like, your mind is seeing what you want to see, because, like, look back, obviously you don't see the same thing anymore, and your brain's just not processing it right. But eventually it got to the point where, like, I was like, all right, dude, I'm gonna Google this, see if, like, it's more than, like, just my friend group who has seen this, right? And I eventually, like, stumbled across, like, a local forum for the area, and in my state, in my area, there was, like, a pretty active forum of, in that neck of woods, seeing a little girl in a white gown holding a teddy bear. And still at that point, it was like, people making up stuff on the internet, and, mob mentality and whatever, blah blah blah. And then eventually I found, like, some news articles about a car crash that had happened on the highway along that stretch of woods. And I don't remember the exact details of like who made it out or who didn't, but I know of the one I know is that there was a little girl who didn't make it out of the crash, who at the time was wearing a white gown and holding a teddy bear.
Parents move back home and they buy a house in the west side of the city we live in now. The house was probably had three rooms, two for my brothers and one for them. But every time like they would go around the house, they had cats too. The cats they would just spot the cats doing strange things, like growling at the corners of the house, hissing. One of them, Misty, she was a very friendly cat, but one day, my mother comes into the room and just sees her, crouched up near the corner, growling and staring at it. And she just kept growling, and then all of a sudden the cat freaks out and runs underneath the couch, still growling at the corner. My mother tries to go over there, but the cat starts freaking out even more and meowing. So my mother stops and she just ignores it and goes somewhere else. This was around maybe when my brothers were 3, 4. My mother goes into my brother's room, my second brother, and he starts crying and bawling his eyes out. And my mother goes over to him and picks him up, and he's still crying, and she asks him what's wrong. And he says, there's something over there. And she says, what are you talking about? There's nothing there. And she looks over at what he was talking about, and she just sees like these dark eyes, like someone was there. So she walks over and turns on the light, and no one's there. So she starts to get really scared, and then it gets around to where I was born, and they decide to move out of the house and move into the house we live in now, which was just built around the time. So I was probably, by the time they finally moved out and moved into this house, I was 1. So I was up in my room playing, and my brothers were in their rooms doing whatever they were doing. And I decided to come out of my room and go see my mom. But then I started to hear sounds, and I started to get really scared, and I looked around, and I just saw, this figure in the corner of my room, and I freaked out, and I started to run to the stairs. But as I was running, I felt something grab me, and I was next to the banister, and I started screaming at the top of my lungs, calling for my mother. My mother runs upstairs, and she freezes in place as she sees me having my arm pulled out and something holding me, and I start crying and screaming how much it hurts. And so she tells me to grab her, and I tell her I can't move. So she grabs my arm, and she rips me as hard as she can out of whatever was holding me. She holds me close, and on my arm there's just a giant red mark. It's not a handprint, but it was a giant red mark around my hand. And I just started crying, and so later on it wasn't nothing too serious. I didn't get bruised or anything, but it left a mark for a bit. So later on, she calls my dad and tells him to go upstairs and grab my brothers, and that we weren't gonna stay in the house tonight because she didn't feel safe. So my dad goes upstairs and grabs my brothers as they're freaking out, not understanding what's going on, as I'm still bawling my eyes out. And my mother, she just calls a priest and tells him what happened. A priest comes by and he sees what happened to me, and he decides to bless the house. After blessing the house, we haven't had anything show up or seen anything. But ever since then, I've always had dreams of like something watching me, and I never felt truly safe.
You know, all this talk about ghost stuff reminds me of the story that my friend told me. He, not gonna lie, he was like walking in the forest by himself. It's really stupid, actually. But he swore to me that he saw what seemed to be a big, like, sheet, what, like, in the shape of a bird. I'm not sure, like, what he meant by that, but, you know, it was interesting.